Make sure you get your date, your page number, and your learning target. Put it in your table of contents. Today we're going to factor a trinomial day 2, and this is one of the days where before what we had was factoring a trinomial when a is 1. Today a is not going to equal 1, so we're going to talk about the steps and what you can do to solve that. So before we get started with that, let's practice one where a is 1. See how it's in standard form, and there's nothing in front of the x squared, which makes this a 1. So we can do our normal x. We're seeing what multiplies to give us negative 24 and adds to give us positive 5. So therefore that would be positive 8 and negative 3. So my answer is x plus 8, x minus 3. You should have had lots of practice over this. You should understand how to do this very well. Okay? However, this number in front of x squared is not always 1. So what you want to do is you want to follow these steps. So you're going to want to pause the screen and jot these down. But the first step is always going to be check and make sure that you can't factor out a GCF. It could be that A is a GCF and you can just take it out and get rid of it and not have to worry about it anymore. Otherwise, you've got to follow these steps. Slide, divide, and bottoms up. So let's start with the first one. Okay? It's in standard form because I have an x squared, an x, and a plain number. However, a is not 1. So I'm going to check and see, can I get rid of that? Is there a GCF? And in this case, there is. I can divide everything in here by 2. So remember back to factoring out a GCF, 2 goes out front. You divide these and you get a 1x squared. Divide these and you get a positive 4x. Divide these and you get a negative 5. Well, look, now that I took out a GCF, it just sits out front. I don't have to worry about this. Let's look at what's in here now. I can factor that. That's a trinomial where a equals 1. So all I have to do now is look for something that multiplies to give me negative 5 and adds to give me 4. And that would be positive 5 and negative 1. So therefore, in parentheses here, I would put x plus 5, x minus 1. And the 2 that I took out in the beginning just sits out front. I don't have to deal with it anymore. I just have to show that I took it out. Okay, so that's not hard if you can factor out a GCF. So you always want to check that first because that's the easiest way to do it. Example 2. First I want to check and see, is there a GCF? So when I'm looking for a GCF here, I've got a 3, a 13, and a 12. Well, I can divide 3 and 12 by 13, I can divide 3 and 12 by 3, but not 13. So I do not have a GCF. There's nothing I can take out of all 3 of these numbers. So I'm going to have to follow those steps that were on the other slide. The first step is to slide. And when you slide, you're going to want to factor. So if you wrote down the steps, you wrote down that when you slide, you're going to multiply a, which is 3, to the back times c. You're sliding it way back here to get it out of the way. So when you do that, you get x squared plus 13x, and then you multiply these two numbers and get 36. Well, now look, a is 1, so that means I can factor that. So that's why this next step is to factor. So you're looking for what multiplies to give you positive 36 and adds to give you positive 13. Well, that would be positive 9 and positive 4. So my first step was slide. The second step is divide. And when you divide, you will have to reduce. This is very, very important. So I'm going to divide by what I did in the beginning. So see how I did slide and I multiplied 3 to the back? Now I'm going to divide by 3. That's what the divide step is. Well, I'm going to reduce this with if I can. So in my calculator, I'm going to type in 4 divided by 3, and if I can and it reduces, then I would reduce it in this step. But it doesn't, so I leave it. X plus 9 divided by 3. Well, 9 divided by 3 is 3. So that one did reduce. Last step, you can't leave it in a fraction, so the last step is going to be bottoms up. Which means if I have this denominator here, it's just going to stick out front. So it becomes 3x plus 4 and x plus 3. And if you remember back to when we factored the last set of trinomials, you can always multiply this back out and you'll see that you do get what we started with. So this is your final answer. Let's try another one. This one doesn't have 3 terms. So just like we did before, see how it's missing the x squared term? I'm going to rewrite it. Go ahead and make it 4x squared plus 0x minus 9. Now in the next step I'm going to check, is there a GCF? And there's not. There's nothing I can divide by 4, 0, and 9. So, therefore, there's not a 1 in front of this x squared, so I'm going to have to follow my steps. Slide. And factor. So when I slide, I'm multiplying 3 times negative 9. And I get a 1x squared now like I wanted, plus 0x minus 36. So now I'm going to factor. What multiplies to give me negative 36 and adds to give me 0? Well, that's positive 6 and negative 6. So this becomes x plus 6, x minus 6. So that was just slide and factor. Next step is to divide. So I'm dividing by a, and a was 4. So when I divide, I need to check and make sure that I can't reduce. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 6 over 4, and I'm going to reduce it, because it does reduce, and you get 3 over 2. And then over here, I also get 3 over 2. The last step, you can't leave it in any fractions, so it's called bottoms up. This denominator comes out front and becomes 2x plus 3, 2x minus 3. And you can check it, multiply it back out, and you'll see that you do get 4x squared minus 9 when you're finished.